Namaste to everyone. Let me welcome you all to this weekend's Mahabharat. Yes, this is weekend number 17 and we entered into the Indian history class number 16. Sir, I have already informed you that with the last class, that is Indian history class number 15, we have completed the Indian prehistory portion. Indian prehistory, that was, the period from 60,000 years ago to around 600 BC. We have completed that in the last class. So let us, before going into the today's topic and what we are going to discuss from today after Indian prehistory, let us just have a small recap of what we discussed, what are the larger contexts and larger topics that we have discussed in the Indian prehistory portion. Yes, we have started with Big Bang theory and we first discussed about how life evolved and then in the ocean, and then how for the first time different species evolved on the terrestrial land, and why different species culminated into a new species of Homo sapiens, that is in the Africa. And we also discussed that how human being out-migrated from Africa and reached different continents of the world. We have discussed everything, and there by 60,000 BC we have the evidence of Homo sapien on the land of India, and that's where the Indian prehistory starts, as we have discussed. And in the Indian prehistory portion, from 60,000 years ago, we discussed we discussed about the Paleolithic period. So Stone Age, normally we discuss that. So how Stone Age from 60,000 years ago to around 10,000 years ago, how this old Stone Age or Paleolithic age was there and how the man was there. We discussed everything about him. And then we discussed from 10,000 to 8,000 years ago, that was the period we call that as Mesolithic era, and we discussed that. And from 8,000 BC, 8,000 years ago to around 6,000 years ago, we discussed that it was the period of Neolithic era. And then after that we discussed Bronze Age, and then by 3000 BC we arrived at the Indian first civilization, that was the Indus Valley civilization. Yes. Then from 3000 BC to around 1900 BC we discussed the Indus Valley civilization period, early Indus Valley civilization period, later Indus Valley civilization period, etc. And then from 1900 BC to around 1500 BC, we discussed that period of transformation from Indus Valley civilization to Vedic period. How on the remnants of the Indus Valley civilization rose a new culture, altogether new culture, that was the Vedic culture by 1500 BC. And in the Indian prehistory portion, we also discussed from 1500 BC to 1000 BC, we discussed the early Vedic period, how the Rig Veda was composed and how a new culture was, which was completely different from Indus Valley culture, how that was, evolved, we discussed during that period. And then for the last 5 classes, we have been discussing about the last period of Indian prehistory, and that was from 1000 BC to 600 BC. And we normally refer to it as the latter Vedic period. So, just 4 classes before, we discussed the polity of the latter Vedic period, and then we discussed the economy of the latter Vedic society and how the social customs were started evolving in the latter Vedic period. And for the last 3 classes, we were discussing about the Vedic literature. Vedic literature, that for the first time we have seen Vedas other than the Rig Veda. Rig Veda was composed in early Vedic period, but all other Vedas like Yajur Veda, Sama Veda and Atharva Veda came up in the latter Vedic period. We discussed that in the Indian prehistorical portion. So by 600 BC, as I have explained in the last class, our Indian prehistory gets over, and from here, from 600 BC to 600 CE, this is the 1000 years period, sir. 600 BC to 600 CE, we call this period as Ancient India history, ancient Indian history, or it is also called as the early history of India. This is what this period is considered after Vedic period. This comes from 600 BC to 600 CE, and normally Indian historians consider this period, this span of 1000 years from 600 BC to 600 CE, that is the ancient history or the early history of India, as the most glorious period of India. Most glorious period of India, sir. Indian historians consider this period as. So after Indian history, we are going to discuss the ancient Indian history. So this is the first class of our ancient Indian history. And the period of ancient Indian history is from 600 BC, that means the end of the Indian prehistory and the end of the Vedic period, to around 600 CE. We discuss this 1000 years period as the ancient or the early history of the India. Now you understand, right? So we completed Indian prehistory, now entered into ancient Indian history. We completed the period of 60,000 years ago to 600 BC, and now we started with 600 BC to 600 CE. Sir, before going to start ancient Indian history, let me give you some small analytical inputs so that you can connect with the later Vedic period to this period. How this smooth transformation happened, how Vedic period led to the post-Vedic period and the latter ancient Indian history. What were the changes? Why we normally distinguish it differently from the Vedic period? What were the main distinguishing features? There should be some difference between Vedic period. That's why only we put it in different sector, different sect to study. So what are those different changes which normally initiated in the Vedic period, but they culminated into a new culture in the new culture, and we refer to that as the ancient culture, ancient Indian culture. So how this, sir, in this time, in this path of time, there are some spots of changes, some spots of analytical changes which happened, which normally connects the one period to another period. And if we understand the underlying causes, we will understand the complete changes in a very macroscopic level, societal level, economy level, religion level. So what are these underlying changes happening in every period which was leading to some other period? So before going to start the period of 600 BC, let us go back again, just 500-600 years back, and let us see what are the changes happening in that period and which led to a sudden shift of society, not sudden but gradual shift of society to ancient Indian historical characteristics. First, one point is in the early Vedic period. Sir, if you see in the early Vedic period, that is 1500 BC to 1000 BC, we have observed that how people are becoming rajas. People are becoming rajas because the society or the so-called people, the group of tribe, themselves choosing a one person as ruler. That means it was like a ancient democratic form of choosing a leader, and he was to be called as Raja. So in the early Vedic period, people themselves, people belonging to one tribe, are choosing one person among them as the leader, and they are calling him as the Raja. This is what happening. This is how people becoming rulers in the early Vedic period, because people have to choose them. But this changed dramatically in the latter Vedic period. If you observe what happened by the end of early Vedic period, that is by 1000 BC, we observe there are 4 important tribal settlements in the Indian landmass. What are the 4? They are almost Kuru tribal settlement, not Kuru, it was Kuru, and then Bharata tribal settlement, then Matsya tribal settlement. So like this, there are 3 to 4 important tribal settlements by the end of early Vedic period. They are tribal settlements because they are nomadic in nature. They did not settle in one particular land, in one particular place or area. They always used to move here and there, towards uphill and downhill in the different seasons with their animals, because they are pastoralists, because they are animal headers, most of them. They are not accustomed to the agriculture. Most of them, I am saying. So that means the person in the early Vedic period who had become Raja, he is not the Raja to the land, but he is Raja to the people. Yes sir, yes or no? Because people are moving always, they are not sedentary in their lifestyle. There is no settled agriculture in the early Vedic period. They are only moving here and there always with their animals in the search of green pastures. That means the leader also was not to the land but to the people. The Raja of early Vedic period was not to the land but to the people. That's why we call these 4 important tribal settlements of early Vedic period as Janas. 4 Janas. So a Raja is for Jana, not to the land. But in the latter Vedic period, that is from after 1000 BC to 600 BC, what happened? We have seen there is a shift in choosing the Rajas. In the early Vedic period, people were choosing the Rajas. In the early Vedic period, people are nomadic. In the early Vedic period, Raja is for the people. That's why they are called as Jana, not the land, king of land. They are the king of people. But in the latter Vedic period, there was a shift. What was the shift? Now, in the latter Vedic period after 1000 BC, people themselves proclaiming as Rajas. People started themselves proclaiming, self-proclamation of, a Raja. This culture evolved in the latter Vedic period. In the early Vedic period, people choosing the Rajas. But in the latter Vedic period, if one person is powerful and strong enough, he used to perform a very large sacrifices and he used to proclaim himself as the Raja. This was the culture we have seen in the latter Vedic period. So there was a shift in choosing the Rajas. This is one point to be understood. This was the underlying change which triggered a lot of other changes in the latter Vedic period. So now the one change is people now started proclaiming themselves as Rajas by performing the large sacrifices. For example, one such sacrifice to become a Raja, most prevalent in the latter Vedic period was Ashwamedha Yaga. Ashwamedha Yaga or Ashwamedha sacrifice. So, for example, if I am living in the latter Vedic period and if I want to become a Raja, what I would do? First, I would perform a large sacrifice called Ashwamedha Yaga. And what was Ashwamedha Yaga? There was to be a horse, and normally the ruler who wants to proclaim himself as a king was to let this horse freely wander. Everywhere it was to let free. And along with the horse, there used to be 2 guardmen who are the representatives of the king who was letting the horse free. And that horse used to go for the far distanced areas. And once it crosses its tribal settlements area, it used to enter into other kings, other Rajas area. And once if the other Raja sees this horse, he would have two options to exercise. One was either to stop the horse, that means stopping the Ashwamedha horse. That means he was to fight with the owner of the horse, that is me. He was to fight with me, and if I win, I would get the land of him and I would become Raja even to his land. If I lose, he would become the Raja to even my land. This is the first option, to fight. And second option was he was to not stop the horse and he was to let it freely go through his land. That means through that gesture he is to accept the suzerainty, the supremacy of me over his land. So this is what Ashwamedha Yaga was. This is how the people expanded their territory, by Ashwamedha Yaga, Ashwamedha sacrifice. And once the Ashwamedha Yaga was completed, all the kings who accepted the supremacy of the original Ashwamedha ruler, he used to perform a large sacrifice and he used to invite all those smaller Rajas to the sacrifice. And this is how the expansion of the territory happened. This is another important feature of the latter Vedic kings. So there was a complete change in the choosing of Rajas. Now, in the latter Vedic period, those nomadic settlements, as I have said, now started shifting their occupation to agriculture in the latter Vedic period. So now agriculture became a very important profession. Agriculture demands sedentary lifestyle. That's why in the latter Vedic period, most of the settlements are sedentary. That means they used to choose one particular area and they used to settle down there. They used to establish villages and a small kingdom. The concept of kingdom has started. And now the king was not chosen in the latter Vedic period. He was not chosen by the people, but he self-proclaimed himself as the Raja. And now, as the early Vedic Raja was Raja of people, not the land, but in the latter Vedic period, because people are already settled in particular land because of the agriculture occupation, now the Raja is not to the people but to the land. And very specifically to say, now the latter Vedic Raja was the Raja of both the people and land. So land was connected to the kingship. And that's why the latter Vedic settlements were called as, kingdoms were called as Janapadas. So Janas of early Vedic period changed into Janapadas. There were many Janapadas. In the early Vedic period, 4 important Janas, Puru, Matsya, like that, Bharata. But now, in the latter Vedic period, many Janapadas have come up. Kuru, Panchala, etc. Gandhara, Kuru, Panchala, Bharata, Matsya, etc. These are the Janapadas. There was a shift from Jana to Janapada. That's very, very important point to be understood in the latter Vedic period. Now, this is what happening in the latter Vedic period. People used to, expand their territories and they used to settle down in one place. They used to claim it as their own and they are called as Janapadas. Like that, many Janapadas were settled. And they started growing up economically. They started growing up, with the kings were becoming powerful. Monarchy was started, developing. A structure of monarchy was developing in the latter Vedic period. And towards the end of the latter Vedic period, if you see, Janapadas, some of the Janapadas, there are many Janapadas in the Indian landmass, like Hastinapur, like Puru, like Panchala. There are many Janapadas. But among them, there are 3 important Janapadas we have to understand. Towards the end of the latter Vedic period, there are 3 important Janapadas. We got the archaeological evidence of them. And what are the 3 important Janapadas in the latter Vedic period? They are, one is Purana Kila. Purana Kila, that is in the Delhi. This is one important Janapada. And second important Janapada was Atranji Khera. This is in the Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh, this is another important Janapadas. And then the third important Janapada was Hastinapur. So like this, there are 3 to 4 important Janapadas evolved among all the Janapadas towards the end of the latter Vedic period. And now we are in the timeline at 600 BC. 600 BC. Now here, Indian prehistory ends, Vedic period ends, and now we starts ancient Indian history. Ancient period of India. That is from 600 BC to 600 CE. And in this ancient history series, which we are going to start today we will discuss the first portion of ancient Indian period. In this 1000 years period, 600 BC to 600 CE, which is considered as ancient India, we will discuss today the first portion of first 300 years. That is from 600 BC to 300 BC. This is the topic that we are going to discuss today. Now, so 600 BC to 300 BC. This period is called as the Post-Vedic period. Why Post-Vedic period? It is because it just comes after the Vedic period, after the offset of the Vedic period. That's why it is called as the Post-Vedic period. Or it is also called as the early Indian period, early Indian history period, or the ancient period, early ancient period, 600 to 300 BC. This is the period that we are going to discuss today. So now, what actually distinguishes this 600 BC, after 600 BC and before 600 BC? Before 600 BC, we have discussed till now that there are Janapadas, Purana Kila, Astinapur, Atranji Khera. So these Janapadas, how the features of Janapadas were there? People in these Janapadas, they are believing, they are living their life on agriculture. That is the main occupation. And they are more rural in their nature. And these Janapadas, the people of the Janapadas were living in the huts. Huts, we have seen the archaeological evidence. In the Purana Kila we had them, in the Hastinapur area we had them. And not only people living in the huts, but even the people were keeping many cattle as possible, because cattle was considered to be the wealth of the latter Vedic period. So cattle was considered to be wealth and it was revered. That's why they used to keep many cattle in every hut along with the people. And we also have seen there are two important crops which are newly cropped up during this latter Vedic period, before 600 BC. Two important crops. In the Indus Valley period, we could not find a crop like rice. We could not find a crop like rice. We could not find a crop like sugarcane. Only we have seen in the Indus Valley period the barley, the wheat, the pulses, the mustard, the sesame, etc. But in the Vedic period, in the especially latter Vedic period, we find the rice crop and the sugarcane crop in these Janapadas areas. So why I am telling all this, because before 600 BC the society was like this. Janapadas were there, they are living in the huts, they are keeping cattle as their main wealth, and they are doing agriculture of different, they are growing up different crops, especially the crops like rice and sugarcane. When this scenario was there, after 600 BC, there was a sudden, not sudden but gradual, visible change happened, and which led to ancient Indian history. The first point which distinguishes before 600 BC and after 600 BC was the rise of Mahajanapadas from these Janapadas. Very important point, sir. As I have said, there are different Janapadas we have. Among all these Janapadas, towards the end of the Vedic period, we have seen some Janapadas were becoming more and more powerful, more and more important than the other Janapadas. And to distinguish them from other Janapadas, now these Janapadas were referred to as historians refer to them as Mahajanapadas, because those Janapadas which were important than the other Janapadas. By 600 BC, we have Mahajanapadas, the rise of Mahajanapadas. And with the rise of Mahajanapadas starts ancient Indian history. Now, first point, what are Mahajanapadas? Today what we are discussing? We are discussing the period 600 BC to 300 BC. This is the first part of ancient Indian period. Ancient Indian period is from 600 BC to 600 CE, but we are only discussing the first 300 years portion. In this period, the first visible change from Vedic period was the rise of Mahajanapadas. Mahajanapadas. Jana were prevalent in the early Vedic period. Janapadas were prevalent in the latter Vedic period. Mahajanapadas were prevalent during the early Indian history period or ancient Indian history period or post-Vedic period. So Mahajanapadas. Now, how many Mahajanapadas do we have? Sir, in total we have many Mahajanapadas, but among them there are 16 important Mahajanapadas. Our historians have concluded 16 important Mahajanapadas. 16. That's why we means here historians name these 16 collectively as Shodasha Mahajanapadas. Shodasha means 16. So there are, how many Mahajanapadas do we have in the post-Vedic period? We have 16 Mahajanapadas. And What are the differences between Janapadas of Vedic period and Mahajanapadas of Post-Vedic period? Let us discuss. So for the first time in the Indian history, we have seen a concept of capital cities. So for the Janas, they are nomadic in nature, so there is no land even attached to them. But in the latter Vedic period, Janapadas, land was attached to them because agriculture was started flourishing. But in the Mahajanapadas era or the Post-Vedic period era, 600 BC to 300 BC, we have seen every Mahajanapada was having a capital city. Capital city, sir. The concept of capital city was started because it indicates, you should understand by now, a Mahajanapada was having a capital city, whereas a Janapada was not having. That means Mahajanapadas were too stronger than the Janapadas. And what might be probably the capital city about? Capital city was actually the area occupied by the main powerful king of the Mahajanapada, perhaps. So wherever the king resides, that area perhaps would be called as a capital city. And so this is the first point to be understood. In the post-Vedic period, we have seen the rise of Mahajanapadas from the Janapadas of Vedic period. And second point was that these Mahajanapadas were having capital cities to them. Every Mahajanapada was having a capital city. Now, how many Mahajanapadas do we have in the post-Vedic period? 16. That's why we call them as Shodasha Mahajanapada. So what are these Mahajanapadas? Let us list out them. Very important, sir. That's why these are also called as the ancient cities, ancient capital cities of India, ancient cities. Because that's why we have to understand what are the areas in which Mahajanapadas rose and how they rose, why they rose like that, and what are the importance of the capital cities and how they still remain a very relevant areas of interest and relevant contributors to the culture of India. Even till today, many of such capital cities were even till today they are very important to Indian economy, Indian culture and everything. Let us discuss what are the 16 Mahajanapadas of post-Vedic period. So the first Mahajanapada and the very important Mahajanapada is Kashi Mahajanapada. Kashi Mahajanapada, and the capital city, so this is in the Uttar Pradesh, and the Kashi Mahajanapada's capital city was Benares, and today we call it as Varanasi. Very important position, very important city. Even till today, it has a very cultural, cultural contribution to the India's prestige and India's heritage. So Kashi Mahajanapada, its capital city was Benares. This is one of the Mahajanapada. And the second important Mahajanapada was Kosala. So Kosala Mahajanapada, this is also in the UP, and its capital city, and this Kosala's capital city is Shravasti. So this is also in the modern time we call it as the area of Ayodhya. So Kosala Mahajanapada, this is also in the UP. This was second Mahajanapada. And the third Mahajanapada, if you see, in the Bihar area, we could come across three important Mahajanapadas. Out of them, the first one was Anga Mahajanapada. Anga Mahajanapada. And this is in the south of the Bihar. And if you see, the capital city of Anga Mahajanapada, it is Champa. Sir, this Champa is very important because this area, this Champa, was to play a very important role in the modern Indian history, in the Gandhian politics, that is Champaran Satyagraha. So this has contributed a lot to the Indian history, national movement in the latter period. So Anga Mahajanapada was from Bihar. And in the Bihar itself, another fourth important Mahajanapada, which is very, very, very powerful Mahajanapada of that time, and that was Magadha Mahajanapada. Magadha, and this Magadha was having two capital cities. Initially, it was located in the Rajgir. the present day Rajgir of Bihar, or it was called as the Rajagriha, the initial capital of Magadha, Mahajanapada. And later, upon the demands of strategic considerations, the post-Vedic rulers of Magadha Mahajanapada changed their capital city from this Rajagriha to Pataliputra, that is the present day Patna, Bihar capital city, sir. So are you understanding? All these capital cities and the areas where Mahajanapadas came up, they contributed a lot to the Indian history, Indian heritage, Indian culture in the latter periods. Even till today they became more relevant than the past. Even today they became more relevant. For example, Patna, for example, Kashi, that is Benares, for example, Koshala, that is Ayodhya. So these are the four important Mahajanapadas. What are they? Kashi, Kosala, Anga, Magadha. And another Mahajanapada was Vatsa Mahajanapada. And this Vatsa Mahajanapada's capital city was Kaushambi. And this is also in the Uttar Pradesh. And another Mahajanapada, if you see, in the north of India, that is in the Kashmir region, in the Hindu Kush mountains, we have a Mahajanapada flourished there, and that was Kamboja Mahajanapada. Kamboja Mahajanapada, and its capital city was Rajpur. Very important. And towards the northwestern portion of Indian subcontinent, that is in the present day Pakistan and Afghanistan, South Afghanistan land, which were once a part of Indian Indian landmass. We have a Mahajanapada rose in the Pakistan and Afghanistan area, that was Gandhara Mahajanapada. Gandhara Mahajanapada, and its capital city was in the Takshila, which is in the present day Pakistan. Gandhara Mahajanapada. And in the Delhi area, you will see three important Mahajanapadas. One is Kuru Mahajanapada. Kuru Mahajanapada, that is in the present day Haryana area. And there are three important capital cities of Kuru Mahajanapada. One was, initially its capital city was Hastinapur. After that it changed to Indraprastha, and then it changed to Isukara. So this is about the Kuru Mahajanapada. And in the Uttar Pradesh itself, in the western Uttar Pradesh, we have seen another Mahajanapada came up, and that was Surasena Mahajanapada. Surasena, and its capital city was Meerut, sir. Meerut. Even till today, this Meerut was very important. And even the residing area also was one of the capital cities of this Surasena, that was Mathura. Mathura, very important cultural contribution to the India in the latter times. And in the Rajasthan area, we have another Mahajanapada, and its name was Matsya. Matsya Mahajanapada, and its capital city was Viratnagar. Very important in the Rajasthan area. And in the Madhya Pradesh, we have two important Mahajanapadas. One was Avanti Mahajanapada. Avanti Mahajanapada. So this Avanti Mahajanapada was having two capital cities. One was Ujjain and another one was Mahishmati. And another Mahajanapada belonging to Madhya Pradesh was Chedi or Cheti Mahajanapada. Sir, another in the UP area, we have another important Mahajanapada, and its name was Malla. Malla Mahajanapada. And its capital city was Kushinagar. If you observe Kashi, Kosala, Magadha, Malla, Vanga, Gandhara, Kamboja, Avanti, Chedi, etc., are you not thinking that most of these have come up in the areas of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Delhi area, Madhya Pradesh area, Rajasthan area, and the northwestern Indian subcontinent? That means most of these are concentrated in the North India. Yes or no? So this post-Vedic period, this is the period where Mahajanapadas rose up, and most of the Mahajanapadas evolved in this North India portion. But in this post-Vedic period, there was only one important Mahajanapada arose in the Dakshinapath, that is the southern India. Only one known Mahajanapada, and its name was Asaka Mahajanapada. Asaka, or it is also called as Asmaka Mahajanapada. Asmaka Mahajanapada, very important. This is in the present day Maharashtra. That was the area in which a Mahajanapada came up. So, as I have explained the names of Mahajanapadas and their capital cities, are you not understanding that most of these are very relevant in all the epics of our India? For example, in Ramayana we could see Ayodhya, that is the Koshala, and even another Mahajanapada, that is Panchala. The Panchala Mahajanapada was having two capital cities. One was Achitra. Achitra was in the Uttarakhand, and another eastern Panchala was having a capital city of Kampilya, and Kampilya was in the eastern Uttar Pradesh. So Kashi, Kosala, Kuru, Panchala, Malla, Anga, Magadha, Matsya, Vatsya, Virata, Vajji, another Mahajanapada, Vajji, and this is in Bihar, and its capital city was Vaishali. These are the 16 important Mahajanapadas and their capital cities, and all are restricted themselves to the North India. So North India was the land of the 16 Mahajanapadas. This is the first feature of this period, that is ancient Indian history. Starts from here on this Mahajanapadas. History recites all the future Indian history. Now, first point we have discussed, that is every Mahajanapada was having a capital city. The concept of capital cities. Now, second important point to be understand here is that, sir, please understand, pay attention. Every capital city was fortified. Every capital city, that right from the Hastinapur to around the Dakshinapad, that is in the Maharashtra region, everywhere in the UP, in the Bihar area, in the northern Kashmir area, wherever Mahajanapadas came up, we have seen the capital cities, and every capital city was fortified with impressive walls, with the tall walls, with brick walls or stone walls. They have been fortified. So most of the capital cities was fortified. So these are the two important characteristics which are very different. That's why we call this period from 600 BC to 300 BC as Post-Vedic period, which is distinguished from the Vedic period. In the Vedic period, there are no capital cities, there are no fortifications, there were no strongest rulers. Monarchy was not too strongest. But now, in the ancient Indian period, that is the starting of ancient Indian period, we could see rise of Mahajanapadas, we could see the capital cities, and we could see the fortification of the capital cities. Fortification. Now, why fortification? Another important question. Why capital cities were having fortification? Historians have studied this context, and they have, given three important inputs. Probably those three might be the reasons for having the huge fortifications around the capital cities of Mahajanapadas. What are the three important reasons they have put down? One reason was perhaps, maybe, as I have said, Mahajanapadas were the important Mahajanapadas among all the Janapadas. They are very important, they are very powerful and very rich. Because they are powerful and rich, they even have a threat of an attack from other Mahajanapadas. Always this threat was there. Every Mahajanapada was having a threat from other Mahajanapadas or some other Janapadas. So maybe because of this threat of an attack from an enemy, to protect themselves, every ruler around their capital cities and around their Mahajanapadas, they have constructed huge forts. So this is probably one of the reasons for constructing the forts around the capital cities. What is that? Protection from the threat of an attack of enemy. Probably this might be the reason. And second reason might be, as I have said, Mahajanapadas were more powerful, more important and more rich than other Janapadas. That means these rulers were so rich and so powerful to such an extent, they wanted to show that richness and show that powerness, to show that power to other Janapadas with a view to give a caution that they are powerful. So maybe that was a status symbol to construct forts. Big walls, impressive walls, tall walls. By seeing that, other Janapadas would frighten and they don't attack it. Perhaps that might be the reason. To showcase their richness and to showcase their power, they might have constructed these big forts around their capital cities. This might be the second reason. And the third reasons are very interesting reason. Probably first two are very natural to understand, but the third reason is very political in nature and very underlying reason probably. Because Mahajanapada rulers were more powerful than the Janapadas of Vedic rulers. They wanted to have a big control over the people and the lands of theirs Mahajanapada. For example, let us take Magadha Mahajanapada, and inside the Mahajanapada the capital city was Rajagriha. So they used to construct a fort to such an extent because people inside the capital city or inside the Mahajanapada and the lands which they cultivate will be in the direct control of the king with the fortification around them. So to have a very good control over the people and agriculture, because agriculture will give them some resources and people used to be taken care of. Because of these two reasons, they used to have a good control over the people and agriculture, that is the land. That's why they used to construct huge forts around them. So they used to feel very secured and controlled. Perhaps these are the three reasons historians have put up in the context of why these fortifications have done. What are the reasons for fortifications of capital cities? One is to protect themselves from the attack of enemies. Second reason was to show their richness and their power to other Janapadas, Mahajanapadas. And the third reason was perhaps to have a good control over the people and the lands. The rulers used to construct the forts around them. Now, upon seeing the capital cities and the fortification, we would naturally get two important questions in our mind. What are they? The first question is that, is it not good to think that to construct so big walls, so big capital cities, so big fortifications, they need a lot of resources. The ruler would need a lot of resources. A lot of planning is needed. So how actually these big expeditions have been taken by these rulers? How did they do that? Construction of fortification of the capital cities, or construction of capital cities. How could they achieve that? Without resources, a king would never construct such a big wall. So how could they do that? How that was possible to the rulers of Mahajanapadas to construct to such a big walls and big capital cities? They need a lot of planning. They need a lot of not only planning, but even to construct such big forts, they are in need of big boulders, big stones and big bricks, some lakhs and thousands of bricks they used to have, the rulers used to procure to construct such big walls. So where did they get from those lakhs of bricks and lakhs of stones? And where did they get actually that planning? It needs a lot of planning, careful planning. So who actually given that service to the ruler? And the third reason was, with building material and with just planning, things will not over. It needs human labor to construct big capital cities and to construct big forts around them. So probably this might be the reason that everyone in the Mahajanapadas, perhaps like women, like children, like men, everyone perhaps had been included in the construction of these big forts. So human labor, how that mass mobilization has happened in these Mahajanapadas. So these are some questions. The underlying questions in everything, that how king got the planning advice, how he could procure such lakhs and thousands of bricks and stones, and how he could mobilize the people for construction of those capital cities and forts. For all these questions underlies one particular general question, that is, where did the king get the resources from? the resources required to construct, to build Mahajanapadas. So what is the source of the ruler, the treasury of the ruler? Very important question. And here lies, because the Mahajanapadas rulers were very ambitious and very enthusiastic to construct big walls and to construct big capital cities, they depended most of it on the levying of taxes on the people. So the ruler started levying the taxes on the people. Most of the people of Mahajanapadas period, the post-Vedic period, 600 BC to 300 BC, they were, as I have said, they are more into agriculture. Agriculture was flourishing because Uttar Pradesh area, Delhi area, Bihar area, if you see, all these are the areas which were flooded by the Ganga plains. Ganga has formed lot of plain areas, so it is very fertile soil. Agriculture was flourishing. From there, from the agriculture and all different occupations like herders, like lot of different sections of society, on everybody the ruler was levying the taxes, and he is getting the resources and using the resources to construct the Mahajanapadas, too big, to make it powerful, to make it rich. This is what happened. So for the first time in the Indian history, we have seen there was a shift from taking the tributes from people, voluntary tributes called as Bali in the early Vedic period. There was a shift in the post-Vedic period, that the ruler forcibly collecting the taxes. In the early Vedic period, the Raja was just taking the tributes from people, voluntary contributions called as Bali. It was a voluntary tax. But in the post-Vedic period, 600 BC to 300 BC, the king himself was collecting the taxes. It's a forceful collection. So this is the third important point which distinguishes this post-Vedic period from Vedic period. This is where the ancient India starts. This is the initial characteristics of ancient India. What are they? First one was Mahajanapadas were having the capital cities. Second point was every capital city was fortified. Third reason was, to do all these things, the king needs resources. And from where did he get the resources? From levying the taxes on the people. Now, in the post-Vedic period, that is 600 BC to 300 BC, the first period of ancient Indian history, there are many sections in the society. Normally, many occupations exist. More people are into agriculture, but there are also people who live on herding, who live on craft making, like weavers, like smiths, goldsmiths, blacksmiths, etc. And there would be some people who live only on the hunting and gathering, like forest people. So how the Mahajanapada rulers, the rulers of this period, 600 BC to 300 BC, how could they levy the taxes on different sections of the society? So let us see the taxation system, which was for the first time we have seen in the Indian ancient history. The taxation system prevailing in the society. So let us see. The first section in the society, more dominant section, was living upon the agriculture. So agriculture was the primary occupation. So how the Mahajanapada rulers were levying a tax on the agriculturalists? Let us see. So normally the tax which rulers levied on the agricultural farmers, especially to say, that tax was called as bhaga. These terms are very important. Bhaga. Bhaga means share. So the tax name was bhaga, and how much would a ruler levy the tax on the farmers? So normally imagine like this: I am a farmer of post-Vedic period, and my ruler, Mahajanapada ruler, he came to me, and I have a 2 acres land, and in which I have produced almost around 2 to 3 tons of cotton. Let us say, assume 2 to 3 tons of cotton. And among this production, how much I should give? I was taxed upon. How it was fixed? Let us see. The first feature, sir, because taxation was introduced for the first time during this period, the bhaga, as the name of the tax was, the tax on agriculture. The bhaga was 1/6 of the production. 1/6 of what was produced was to be given to the royal treasury or the Mahajanapada ruler's treasury. This was a rule put by the ruler. 1/6. 1/6 means, for example, almost 13%. If you have produced 100 kgs of rice, you have to give 13 kgs of rice to whom? The king. If you have produced 100 kgs of wheat, you have to give 13 kgs to the king, royal treasury. So this mandatory regular collection of the tax on the agriculture, which was called as the bhaga, and how much of the produce was taken? It was 1/6 of the produce. This is the first tax on the farmers. This is where, we will see this has peaked. This went to the peak during the era of British. It was almost, for example, it went up to 50 to 60% of the produce. But for the first time in the ancient India, in the post-Vedic period, the first tax on the crop was almost 13%, that is 1/6 of the produce. Now, this is on the tax on the farmers. Now, who others are residing in the Mahajanapadas? Along with the farmers, we have another section of the society who lives on the herding of animals. They don't have land, they don't do agriculture, but they live on herding of animals like goats, cattle, etc. So how the ruler was taxing these people? Let us see. So these herders, because they are the owners of the animals and because they produce the animal products, for example like milk, for example like butter, for example like the hair of the goat, for example like the hides of the animals, and at last the meat of the animals. These are the different animal producers, animal products. So the king was levying tax, not in the form of the crop or not in the form like that, but these herders used to give a certain portion of their meat or a certain portion of their animals, a certain portion of their animals' hair, or certain portion of their milk and butter, etc., animal products. They have to contribute to the royal treasury. It is customary in nature, upon the nature of the animal they possess, upon the nature of the quality of the product they get, they used to tax on them. It was customary tax. So herders were to give the animal products to the ruler. This is the second taxation tax on the herders. And the third important section was craft persons in the society. So how the Mahajanapadas rulers were taxing the craft persons? Craft persons means those who do manufacturing. For example, weaving. A weaving is a crafts person. And for example, blacksmith is a crafts person. Goldsmith is a crafts person. So how the ruler of Mahajanapada was taxing these crafts persons? Let us see. Sir, if you are a goldsmith, the rule was in this period, post-Vedic period, the rule was like this. If you are a goldsmith and if you do a jewelry work, in every month, one particular day was fixed, so that on that day you have to work only for the royal treasury. So this is, the taxation is not in the form of cash, not in the form of gold, etc., but in the form of the labor. That means one day of 30 days, one day of every month, you should work for the king. You should work for the ruler. If you are a blacksmith, you should make the iron tools, etc., for or the swords for the army, or the iron tools for the agriculture. So you should make all this. If you are a blacksmith, one day of every month you should dedicate to the king. This is one form of taxation. If you are a goldsmith, you should make jewelry for the royal treasury or a royal family, one day of 1 month. And if you are a weaver, you should make the clothes. One day of every month you should work only for the king. This is how this section, craftspersons, were levied tax upon. Now, we have seen the tax on farmers, that was 1/6 of production. It was called as bhaga. We have seen the tax on herders, that was animal products and all the the share in the annual products. And we have seen the tax on the craftspersons, that is in the form of labor. 1 day was to be dedicated for the king in every month. And the fourth section of the society were hunters and gatherers. Hunters and gatherers, normally they live in the forest, inside the forest. So how these people were levied taxes upon? It was such that the ruler was to receive lot of fruits, lot of vegetables, lot of timber, lot of vegetables, lot of animals and birds from the forest through the forest hunters and gatherers. That means the forest produce was to be given, contributed to the royal king or the ruler of the Mahajanapada. And these are the sources of revenue to the king. So the tax from farmers, the tax from herders, the tax from craftspersons, the tax from hunting and gatherers, those were to be collected through some officials and they were to be kept as a royal treasury. And from this royal treasury, the expenditure was on the fortification, the expenditure was on the the capital city building. And another important point is, for the first time, this is what I am saying, the first distinguishing factor of post-Vedic period was capital cities, second was fortification, third was taxation, and the fourth important point I am going to tell you. The fourth important point is, because to run everything as per the wish of the ruler was always to be backed by army. So for the first time in the early Vedic period, we never had a even temporary army. We never even have a temporary army. Only when battles used to occur, people used to regroup themselves as a militia to fight, to defend themselves in the early Vedic period. Because their Raja they are only nomadic people. So in the latter Vedic period, it was stabilized. Temporary army was started. But in this first ancient Indian first period, that is post-Vedic period, 600 BC to 300 BC, we have seen for the first time a standing, permanent, regular army. So institutionalization of army started in this period, 600 BC to 300 BC. So the king was always to maintain a regular army. And soldiers were to be recruited throughout the year, and soldiers were to be paid their salaries throughout the year. And where did they get the salaries from? They get the salaries from this royal treasury, from which where did the royal treasury has been filled from? From the taxes on the farmers, from the taxes on the different sections of the society. So this is how the economy and the polity of the Mahajanapadas was running. That's why they became powerful. That's why they became too rich. So this is what was happening. Now another question, sir. In the Vedic period, we never had a tax, regular tax, compulsory tax. In the early Vedic period, we were having bali, voluntary tax. Only people themselves used to give some contribution to the king, Raja. But in this Mahajanapada, ruler was imposing this tax. So mandatorily the people should give. So how it was possible to the farmers to give such 13% of share to the king? It was possible, sir, because of this reason. The production in this period, if you see, it was completely different. Early Vedic society was restricted to northwestern India, that is in the Indus Valley and Indus River alongside. The latter Vedic period was just moved eastward, that is in the Delhi area. But now, this post-Vedic period, it was restricted throughout the northern India, especially UP, Bihar areas, which were very fertile than the other previous settlements. That's why the production got increased. That's why this taxation was feasible. The ruler was, able to collect the taxes because the agricultural production got increased in this period. So that was the contribution of geography to the economy and polity. Now, how the agricultural production got increased? Another question. One reason was that because of the presence of the fertile lands, because of huge rivers like Ganga, Yamuna, these are the rivers around which these Mahajanapadas came up. This is the another reason. But there are two other important reasons which actually triggered a very sudden revolution in the agriculture. Two important reasons. So what are the changes happened in the agriculture sector which led to such huge contribution of people to the king, royal treasury, let us say. Sir, especially there are two important reasons. Two important reasons. The first reason, what was the first change in the agriculture sector was the growing use of the iron plowshare. Growing use of the iron plowshare. Plow. Sir, yes, in the Indus Valley period itself, we have seen the usage of plow technology. How did we know that? We found the, bullock cart toys. We found the plow toys of terracotta toys. So yes, the plowing technology was there in the Indus Valley period itself, but they were restricted to the wooden plows. But by 1000 BC, in the later Vedic period, we have seen the discovery of a metal, strong metal called as the iron. But just after discovering it, we cannot expect it to be put into lot of uses. Yes or no in the society. So normally it takes 300 to 400 years to a metal become popular to such an extent that even common people use them in their daily life. And that time has come when iron was discovered in 1000 BC, but by 600 BC, when we enter into the Mahajanapadas Era, 600 BC to 300 BC, we have seen that metal which was discovered in the later Vedic period now put into all sectors of Indian economy, put into use. So iron plowshare has started, and that triggered a very big change in the agriculture. Why? What it brings? What is the change it brings? Why it is different from wooden plowshare? Yes, it is different, sir, because through wooden plowshare you cannot till a soil. You cannot turn a soil which is very heavy in nature or which is clayey in nature. So normally heavy soils and clayey soils cannot be turned much, cannot be tilled much. So this aeration process, why we normally till, why we use plowing technology? Because to turn the soil so that it gets aeration process gets completed. And even another one was to replace the lower soil, lower strata with the upper strata, because upper strata loses the nutrition as we cultivate. Not the nutrition but the nutrients as we cultivate. That's why we put it into the lower strata, and the lower strata normally have richer nutrients, so we put it into the upper side. So one reason was to replace the nutrients richness, another one was to add the air, that is the aeration process to the soil normally. These are the two reasons for which we plow. So the wooden plow, it cannot till deep, first reason. Second reason was if soil is very heavy, wooden plow cannot be much freely used. And if the soil is very clayey, wooden plow cannot be tilled, cannot be used to be tilled the soil. And that's why this growing iron plowshare technology, it has put a lot of other lands like heavy soil lands, clay soils into agriculture. So it was possible because of the growing use of iron plowshare. So because many lands came into the agriculture, production got improved. Because the production got improved, people were able to give tax to the ruler. Because of that, ruler could maintain the army. Because of that, the Mahajanapada was to grow richer and powerful. This is what happened. This is the contribution of geography to the polity and economy. Now, this is the first change happened in the agriculture sector, which made the taxation possible. Growing iron plowshare technology. And the second important reason, sir, in the agriculture itself, second important major revolution which led to growing production of agricultural produce. What was that? Sir, in the early Vedic period, the agriculture they are nomadic in nature, so there was no prevalent agriculture. But in the later Vedic period, they were growing the different plants, different crops. But the way of sowing the soil, sowing the seeds is very different compared to the post-Vedic technology. So in the later Vedic period, how a crop used to be grown? First, it used to be soil used to be tilled, with the plowing technology, wooden plow, and then the seeds of the crop, what which you want to grow, you used to scatter them. This is the broadcasting technology. Normally what we do, we scatter the seeds in the soil directly. So when monsoon rain comes, normally those seeds will germinate and it becomes a crop. This is what the broadcasting technology, the seed sowing technology present in the Vedic period. But in this post-Vedic period, a new technology came up which triggered a very big change in the agricultural production. So what is the disadvantage of the broadcasting technology? The disadvantage is that out of all the seeds that you scatter on the soil, most of them don't survive, they do not survive. Only out of 10, only 6 to 7 would germinate and become a plant or sapling. That's why in this period, 600 BC to 300 BC, during the period of Mahajanapadas, what people have done was, they have introduced a new technology called the transplantation of the paddy technology. Transplantation technology. What is this transplantation technology? As I have said, the previous technology was broadcasting, scattering technology. But now they observed that because we scatter them on the soil, most of them are not germinating. That's why what these people, Mahajanapadas Era people did was, before they scatter, they avoided complete scattering of the seeds. The sowing technology was completely, they changed. At their homes itself, first they used to grow the saplings in a small, controlled area. They used to grow some small saplings. We call them as, in Telugu, we call them as naru. So and even the place in which we grow it was called as the madi. In every home we used to do like that. We used to give water to the saplings, paddy saplings, so that they will grow. And once they grow, once the sapling came out of the seed, they used to take this sapling to the field and they used to sow it there. And this technology, this transplantation, this technology is called as the transplantation. Even till today in the rural areas you see that technology, transplantation technology. First people used to grow the paddy seeds, paddy saplings inside their homes, and then they take it to the fields and they used to keep them inside the wet soil, paddy soil. This is the transplantation technology. Because of this adoption of this technology, out of 10 saplings, almost 10 or 9 saplings would survive. That is how the agricultural production got improved. And because agricultural production got improved, the share of ruler was assured and the ruler would give salaries to the soldiers, and this cycle of strength, victorious cycle we can call it as, of Mahajanapadas was successful. So these are the two changes happened in the agriculture sector. So what we discussed today? We discussed today in the initial 10 to 15 minutes, we discussed the Indian prehistory recapitulation. And then we started with the Mahajanapadas. We said that capital cities were for the first time came up. Then we said fortification has come up. And then we discussed the 16 Mahajanapadas and their capital cities. And then we discussed the taxation system on farmers, how it was, elders, how it was levied, and on the craftspersons and the hunter and gatherers. And at the last we discussed that what were the changes happened in the agriculture sector, so that all this taxation, capital cities, fortification has become possible. Now let us take, among all these 16 Mahajanapadas, let us take two important case studies. Two important Mahajanapadas, and if you two important but different and contrasted to each other in the system of governance, in the system of everything. But two are very important Mahajanapadas. If you understand these two Mahajanapadas, their polity, their economy, etc., perhaps you may imagine and you can understand every other Mahajanapadas of this period, from 600 BC to 300 BC. Let us take two important of them among the 16 Mahajanapadas. We discussed now two important Mahajanapadas. One is Magadha. Magadha belongs to one set of Mahajanapadas. which followed one type of pattern of growth and pattern of expansion. And another set represented by another Mahajanapadas, and that another one we discuss is Vajji Mahajanapada. Both are in the Bihar area. Both are in the Bihar area. Why only I picked up these two? Because from these two Mahajanapadas, after 300 BC, we would see some change. A very big change again. That's why I took these two as an example. So let us first discuss the Magadha Mahajanapada. Magadha. First, to say Magadha Mahajanapada is the most powerful Mahajanapada among all other Mahajanapadas. It is the most powerful Mahajanapada. And the question comes, when I say it is the most powerful Mahajanapada, why? Why could, even in the Mahabharata, we have seen some Mahajanapadas like Kuru, Panchala, Hastinapur, Bharata, etc. But even they did not survive. But the Magadha Mahajanapada of this period, this survived and grew into a very powerful kingdom, and later it paved a way to a new change, which we will discuss in the coming classes after 300 BC. Why Magadha has become much powerful? First thing is, this Magadha system of governance represents a very strong monarchical form of a system of governance. This is the representative of all those Mahajanapadas which follow this monarchical form of Mahajana polity. So Magadha was too powerful, and now let us discuss why Magadha was become too powerful. Sir, as I always say, geography contributes to economy and polity. So now the first point is that Magadha became too powerful because of the presence of two important rivers which flow through the Magadha. What are the two important rivers? One is river Ganga, another one is river Gomati. Not Gomati, I am very sorry. River Ganga is one, and another river was I forgot its name. Perhaps it is some river. Yes, river Sun. It is a tributary of Ganga. River Sun, S-O-N, Sun. So both of these rivers, Ganga and Sun, they both flow through the Magadha. That's why Magadha, the region of Magadha, is too fertile, and there was a bounty of crop the people used to, produce. They used to contribute to the royal treasury. That's the one reason. Two rivers flow through them. So when two rivers flow through the Mahajanapada of Magadha, we have seen fertile lands that contributed to agriculture. Another contribution of these two rivers to the power to Magadha to become a powerful kingdom was river Ganga and river Sun. They have given an opportunity to the Magadhan people to pursue a cheap and a economical communication and transportation through the rivers. So when bulk goods and when bulk articles, articrafts used to be traded between the people, normally bullock carts were to be used by the land route, but if you use the river route, they used to be very economical in the transportation and even the communication. It contributed a lot to the flourishing of trade in the Magadha. This is one reason, because of the presence of rivers. And another river was, another reason of why Magadha became powerful. Another reason is, sir, in the Magadha, that is in the present day Bihar, southern Bihar, if you see, in that area, when in this period 600 BC to 300 BC, when Magadhan Mahajanapada was there, inside it there was huge forest cover existed. Huge dense forest cover. And because they were having thick forest, inside the forest, this Bihar area and especially eastern India, in this Magadha Mahajanapada area, the forests were having lot of elephants in them. And what these Magadhan rulers were to do, they used to capture these elephants, they used to train them, and they used to recruit them in the army. So elephants were part of the army of Magadhan Magadhan kings, Magadhan rulers. That's why they became too powerful. No other Janapada, no other Mahajanapada could fight them or could win over them. This forest cover has added a lot of, and another reason, because of the presence of the forest contributed a lot of wood to the people of Magadha. Free wood. That means the wood was used to the construction of buildings of the people, wooden buildings, or for the construction of the carts. For example, as I have said, bullock carts to transport the goods to be traded. They used to use the bullock carts. So for the construction of those carts, forest would contribute a lot. The forest wood. And the third reason of third important contribution of forest wood was to construct big chariots. So when a king goes to the battle, he used to go on the chariot. So normally the eminence or what I can say, the egalitarianism, not egalitarianism, but the as large as, if a chariot is as large compared to other kings' chariots, it represents his strength and richness. So the magnificence, I can say, yes, this is the word I am searching for. The magnificence of chariot will describe indirectly to the opponent that how rich and powerful the Magadhan king was. So these chariots were to be constructed using the forest wood. And this is another reason why Magadhans become too powerful. A strong monarchy was set up in this Magadhan Mahajanapada. As I have said, the presence of rivers and the presence of forest, yes, contributed, but they are necessary, but they are not sufficient conditions for a kingdom to flourish. What is the sufficient and necessary condition? It was Magadha Mahajanapada was having 3 important ambitious rulers. Sir, only when the ruler is ambitious and when the ruler is too strong enough, then only all these factors would contribute or would help him in making a kingdom too strong. And who are these 3 important successful rulers of Magadha? They are Bimbisara, they are Ajatasattu, and the Mahapadmananda. So these 3 are very important. Bimbisara, Ajatasattu, and Mahapadmananda. Please listen these names. The first 2, if you see, Bimbisara and Ajatasattu, they could able to win over all the surrounding Janapadas. They are too ambitious. They conquered most of the Janapadas around them. Bimbisara and Ajatasattu. And the third ambitious ruler was Mahapadmananda. And during his period, the Magadha Mahajanapada kingdom was extended even till to the northwestern portion of the Indian subcontinent. Throughout the North India, it got extended. Magadhan Empire. Sorry, not empire, Magadhan kingdom or Magadhan Mahajanapada. So ambitious rulers were the third important but most important reason for the successful flourishing of the Magadhan kingdom. What are the 3 reasons? Presence of the rich rivers, second was the forest, third was the ambitious rulers. And I have been telling you that Magadha is so powerful, Magadha is too rich. Is there any evidence to show that Magadha is really powerful? Yes, there is an evidence. Sir, if you see, this is the period 300 BC, 600 to 300 we are discussing about. But towards the end, at around 300 BC, if you see on the world stage, in the world history, if you see, there was a king, there was a ruler from Europe in the country of Greece, and the capital city is Athens. So there was a Macedonian king. He actually, not the Greece, I am very sorry, in the Europe, from a country called Macedonia, there was a person, a ruler called Alexander, and he wanted to conquer the world during this period, 300 BC. He wanted to conquer the world, and he started the world expeditions, and he started from Europe. He completed his expeditions through the Egypt. He conquered the Egypt, and through the West Asia, he even conquered the West Asia. He reached to the northern west border of the India. And when Alexander reached the river Beas, that is in the present day Pakistan, Punjab of the region. Alexander reached even till to the river of Bees. And do you know the conversation? The memoirs of Alexander says that there was a conversation between Alexander and his soldiers that to move forward into India, the soldiers of Alexander were feared. They feared because they listened somewhere that Indian Magadhan Mahajanapadas army was having a lot of foot soldiers, not only foot soldiers but a lot of big chariots, and not only that, elephants were part of their army. That's why they have feared to move forward into India. And from there, Alexander had to go back, had to retreat because of this reluctance of their soldiers to move forward into India. And this, historical scene explains us that Magadha was such powerful. Magadha was such, strong kingdom that India ever could produce. And that's base was from Magadha, Bihar region. This is, how the Vedic Janapadas became Mahajanapadas and became a strong monarchical kingdoms were established during this period, 600 to 300 BC. So this is one type of Mahajanapadas existed during this period. As I have said, there is, in contrast, complete contrast to this monarchical form of governance, there was another set of Mahajanapadas in the same period. And now let us discuss one among them to know everything. Just like Magadha, most of the Mahajanapadas were like that. They used to have a king, a very ambitious king. They used to have resources. They used to mobilize them and become strong and attack other Janapadas. This is how the monarchical form of Mahajanapadas existed. But in contrast, in pure contrast to this system of governance, in the contemporary period, 600 to 300 BC itself, another set of Mahajanapadas, like they are called as they work on the principle of, they operate on the principle of gana or sanghas form of governance. It was in complete contrast to the monarchical form of governance. In the monarchical form of governance, Mahajanapadas, only king was the ultimate ruler. But in these set of Mahajanapadas, which works on the principle of sangha and ganas, not one king, but there are many kings together rule their, sanghas and ganas. In English, they are called as republics. This is how we trace the earlier form of democracy too. Not one or two, but thousands of people combinedly rule their, their country or their kingdom. And this is the second set of Mahajanapadas. Let us take one among them and study that. And now I am going to discuss about Vajji Mahajanapada. Vajji Mahajanapada. It belongs to this set of Mahajanapadas, Ganas and Sanghas. So Vajji, this is also in the Bihar, North Bihar, and the capital city of this Vajji Mahajanapada was Vaishali, and it is a Gana or a Sangha. Gana or Sangha means republic or assembly. So the first important difference between Magadha and Vajji was, in Magadha one ruler was there, so it is a monarchy. But here, not one ruler, but thousands of people come together. Everyone were called as Rajas, and they used to discuss the matters. They used to debate the matters, and they used to take the decisions about the Vajji people. They used to organize the assemblies. They used to conduct debates and discussions on the issues to be taken up, and on the decisions to be taken up. This is what the difference between Magadha and Vajji. And now, in the Vajji, if you see, in the Vajji Mahajanapada, one was many rulers. Second was, they used to always have frequent, compulsory and regular meetings, regular assemblies. They used to meet regularly and discuss the problems of people, and whenever some other kingdom comes to a battle, they used to meet and discuss how to deal with it, etc. Now, assemblies was another reason, but even these Vajjis were having some important disadvantages. One was, women were not allowed in this. Women were not part of these ganas or sanghas. This was one of the disadvantages. So that's why we cannot completely call it as a democracy, but it was a very limited form of democratic roots we have in this period, Vajji and etc., ganas and sanghas. And another reason, another feature of this Vajji Mahajanapadas was, if you take the most philosophical contribution of this period, 600 BC to 300 BC, the world's most philosophical contributions, most best philosophical contributions, most refined philosophical contributions, they came from these two, these type of Mahajanapadas, that is from ganas and sanghas. For example, to take, there were two pillars of Indian philosophy. They are Vardhaman Mahavir and the Gautama Buddha. They both belong to such ganas or such sangha based Mahajanapadas. Both Gautama Buddha and Vardhamana Mahavira, both are from these type of Mahajanapadas. So these, in general, to say Magadha we have seen and Vajji we have seen. These are the two types of Mahajanapadas that we had during prevailed in this period. Now, so when this was happening, when this is what happening in the India, almost we had completed today's class, but let me discuss you one more point. When this was happening in the Indian scenario, 600 BC to 300 BC, we have traced the democracy to the Vajji form of governance or the sangha ganas of Indian governance, Indian system of governance. So democracy was started in India during this period, we can say literally. That means on the world stage also similar fashion exists, similar pattern exists. So on the world there was a country called Greece, and in the Greece the capital city was Athens, and in the Athens the people literally established a system of governance called as democracy. And they had given citizenship to complete and full citizenship to the people of Athens. In the Athens city, they have given full complete citizenship, but even that was having some limitations. One limitation was only those who completed 30 years, who are above 30 years, would get the citizenship. And another limitation was that in that too only men were granted the citizenship, not the women. So they used to meet in 70 sessions. The Athens assembly used to meet in 70 sessions throughout the year, and they used to discuss the debates. They used to do the debates and discuss about their issues. This is one form of governance called as democracy, established on the world stage. And in the India during the same period, we have seen that in the sanghas and ganas, and from them only came the Vardhaman Mahavir and the Gautama Buddha. So this is what in brief to say the polity of the Mahajanapada period, or the post-Vedic period, or the early ancient period, whatever you call, but the period is from 600 BC to 300 BC. This is the first part of ancient Indian history series, and now in the coming classes we discuss in the same period 600 to 300 BC how the different rulers came up, and how different social domain changes have come, and how religious changes have come. And at the last we discuss about the two important religions of this period, 600 BC to 300 BC. They are the Jainism. In response to the Brahmanical dominance of Vedic, I have said in every class of last classes that always there was a resentment in the Vaishyas and the Shudras, and from Vaishyas came they wanted to have an alternative religion. That's why we could see in this period there were two important religions came up in response to the Brahmanical dominance, and they are Jainism and Buddhism. We will discuss them in the in this series in the latter classes. So this is what in brief the period about 600 to 300 BC. So please do study, go through the the material that I am going to give you, the class notes. which I will attach in the description and even in the comment box. So please go through that, and feel free to express your opinions if you are seeing this video at all. And most of you are not enthusiastic as I feel, because if you are really interested, you would normally discuss with me. Yes, I know perhaps I am not a good teacher, excellent teacher, but definitely I am giving my rightful inputs. I know maybe it is not excellent class, but still it is useful to some people who really wants to have the fact, the crux of the education. So for them I am putting my efforts, and this will continue. My efforts will continue definitely, and please go through your class notes and etc. So this is in brief the period of 600 to 300 BC. So let us meet in our next class in the part 2 of 600 to 300 BC itself, but some other domains we will discuss of the same period. Until then, thank you.
Thank you. अथ श्री महाभारत कथा।